It's me, the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Hey, check out my new tag team, baby, Monte and the Pharaoh.
Hey, Jimmy, don't forget to tell them about Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast.
Well, you know what, I would, but you already did it.
It's Monte and the Pharaoh.
With Monte and Pharaoh.
The Monte and Pharaoh Show.
Monte and Pharaoh, bro.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
The Monte and Pharaoh Show. And you're watching the Monte and Pharaoh Show. Monte and the Pharaoh.
With Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
It's Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh. Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and Pharaoh.
It's Monte and the Pharaoh.
And Monte and the Pharaoh. Oh, is it Monte and the Pharaoh?
Monte and Pharaoh.
The Monte and the Pharaoh Show.
Monte and the Pharaoh. To the Monte and the Pharaoh Show. And it's Monte and the Pharaoh, baby.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
With Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh. Oh, what a run. Monte and the Pharaoh.
Monte and the Pharaoh.
Hey, cut music. When you want the best in professional wrestling, Long Island, there's only one place you're going to get it, right here.
Monte and the Pharaoh. Now, that's not just the coolest, and that's not just the best. That, my friends, is just incredible. Monte and the Pharaoh.
You've got the future Hall of Famer, that rocker, Marty Jannetty, MJ in the house, and I'm sitting here with two more future Hall of Famers, Monte and the Pharaoh. We're doing that stuff, and we gonna rock it.
Chris Benoit should not be in any Hall of Fame. Plain and simple.
Straight to the top. We're living this life, not just dreaming it, we're doing it for real. Straight to the top. Working hard every day just to live out that tower.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast out of our new home, Indie Music TV. The star
Fancy schmancy
of the show.
Oh,
to my right,
Yeah,
Mr.
to
Jimmy
your right.
Pharaoh. Jimmy, how are you, my
It
friend?
says here to the left. What?
I changed it on mine, pal.
Oh man, talk about on the fly. You
Don't
rock.
abuse me, please.
No.
Mr. Jim Daus. Jim, how are you, buddy?
Doing pretty well. How y'all doing?
How did you, growing up, how did you meet Nancy?
Nancy and I met in high school. Well, actually, my last day of my senior year in high school, I was at the school to pick up or drop off some books on the last day. She was at the bus loop and with some friends of mine, and I didn't know she lived right around the corner from me. So I ended up giving her a ride home, and we live in a rural part of Florida, so it's about a 45-minute ride home. And we became friends that day, started dating about a week later, got married about a year later.
What type of person Nancy was? There's always rumors when you're a celebrity. I'm just curious to hear directly from the source. What sort of person was she, Jim?
She was fun-loving, an amazing person. She was a great wife for 4+ years. She just liked to enjoy life and have fun. She really didn't want to work that much.
She was like, I guess silent but deadly would be a great way to describe her on-screen persona. How was she behind the scenes? Was she reserved?
She was. She was very shy until we had to pull it out of her. After we got married, I had to pull that personality out of her a little bit.
How does she get involved in the wrestling world?
It's a long story, but we started going wrestling on Sunday nights. And it was in Orlando at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium, and we'd call in and reserve our seats. They said, you know what? We have 3 seats available on the front row that you can have every week if you want like season tickets.
Okay.
So I said, that's at the time, Nancy was only 16 years old. Her parents wouldn't let her go, so she wasn't going at first.
Was Nancy involved in apartment wrestling too? How does that come about?
Yeah, well, that came a little bit later. What happened was Bill Otten, who most of these pictures are taken by, Bill Otten, the wrestling photographer, and he took one picture of Terry Funk taking my chair out from underneath me in the front row and throwing the chair into the ring. And Nancy was sitting right next to me, of course. Bill Otten just took it and had Nancy's face in the picture. So he sent it with his rolls of film to the Japanese wrestling magazines, and they put it a 3-page pull-out centerfold. And when he got the magazine back, he brought it over to us. We never met Bill or talked to Bill, and he said, "Can I talk to you guys for a minute?" And he showed us the picture and showed us the magazine, and he said, "I just had to show you guys this. It's your chair and your wife's face right there when Terry Funk's throwing the chair." So that's how we got to meet Bill. And about 2 weeks after that, Bill Otten said he just bought a bunch of new equipment, some new photo equipment. And he's never done anything but wrestling, really, shooting. So he wanted to try out his new photo equipment and he asked if Nancy would be available. He said, "If we can use Nancy in these pictures, I'll give you a whole portfolio. All the pictures will be yours. It's really just testing the equipment." So we got to be good friends with Bill Otten, and that's how we got into wrestling.
When you were getting Nancy into the business as her husband, as a man, did you ever feel concerned, like when it was happening, as you're getting into the business? Is there a little voice maybe possibly asking yourself, this could get out of control? She's a beautiful woman. They may try to use her for her looks. Yeah. The wrestlers are all pretty much, from what we hear, a lot of them were very aggressive towards any woman. They don't care if it's your wife. They don't care if it's someone's girlfriend. Did you ever early on get flashes in your own head going, this could get crazy? Am I doing the right thing here?
No, it really didn't. Everything seemed to be working out well. Nancy and I always got along real well. We had a very good marriage. Everything was good. It was later on that those things popped up. Okay. Her head got a little bit bigger, of course, and she knew that we could actually do this. And we grew apart. We started growing apart. She started doing some shows in Texas and Baltimore and places like that without me. And then when she got home one trip, we started talking. I said, "Nance, I really think that I am holding you back. Us being married is holding you back.
Wow.
We are starting to grow apart, and you might want to think about this." And right after we thought about this for about 2 days, after I picked her up at the airport, we talked about it. We decided, let's separate and see what happens. As soon as we separated, her career just took off like crazy. It was the worst year of my life. There's no doubt about that. When we were going through the divorce and everything else and watching her become famous, that was our dream. The whole gimmick and everything else, the way she dressed and so forth, we put all that together, both of us together. And Billy Jack Haynes came in one day and was watching us and talking with us, and he wanted to get a couple girls in for the shoot. And he said, "Nancy's great. Let's get Nancy. And don't you have a friend or somebody else?" And Bill had another friend that he brought in. And Kevin came in to watch us shoot. And Kevin became interested in the whole thing, and we did some pictures with Kevin then. And Kevin and I were pretty close friends. All three of us were close friends for a couple of years or a year and a half there. We were with each other on the road quite a bit. And I don't have any hard feelings for Kevin. Last time I talked to Kevin was probably 10 or 11 years ago after the horrible tragedy.
I know you were separated from Nancy, but then you find out that Kevin's with Nancy. Do you feel betrayed at all, or do you feel like your friendship, like maybe this was going behind your back?
I felt betrayed at the time, but now I'm 35, 40 years later, married to a wonderful person for 31 years. My wife, Sue, and she's amazing. It worked out great. Everything worked out.
I mean, did you stay in contact over the years with Nancy from time to time, or was that even a possibility, considering you were involved in the life you've spoke of now with your wife of 31 years? I mean, was there any relationship with Nancy as her star rose?
Here and there. The first 2 years, we did talk off and on what she was doing, what her career was doing, and so forth. Then it was odd. I would run into her in airports all over the place. Run into her in Chicago or in Iowa one time. I mean, it was crazy how I'd run into an airport. And a lot of time we were both flying back to Daytona. That's why I still live in the Daytona area, and that's where she was living. So we'd see each other once in a while or talk to each other once in a while, yes. And right after wrestling, I started working with Baddest Company. It was promoting Badman contests all over the United States. I was working with two partners in doing that. So we were traveling around a lot also. We were running a dozen shows a year all over the United States. So I was flying a lot. And I fly a lot for my business also with the high-end fireplaces, the high-end barbecue grill. So I was on the road a lot. So one trip I was running late from a Badman contest, and it was like the OJ thing running through the airport.
Yeah.
Got to the gate right before they closed it. Got on the plane, and they said, "There's one seat in the back." All right, so I get on the plane, go all the way to the back, and Nancy's sitting right there. How you doing? I looked down. I said, "Nancy." She goes, "Oh my God, sit down." We talked for 2.5 hours on the way to Atlanta, and then we changed planes in Atlanta. Got on the next plane and sat together, on the plane from Atlanta to Daytona. And then my wife was picking me up from the airport down that trip. So I get off the plane with my ex-wife and my new wife picking us up. It was pretty fun. Nancy put her arms around her and gave her a big hug and said, "Oh, I've heard so many good things about you," and everything else. And I said, "Sue, this is my ex-wife, Nancy." And it was an experience.
I want to go back to your conversation with Sullivan. What does Sullivan say to you?
It's been, like I said, that was 10, 11 years ago. He was just telling, we were talking about the whole thing and how horrible it was. We didn't talk about what happened after Nancy and I split and them two got together. We didn't talk about that. We were just talking about how bad the situation was.
Nancy and the Hustler lawsuit. If anyone who doesn't know, in 2007, Hustler published nude photos of Nancy after her death. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, that was, first of all, Nancy and I never wanted to get into Hustler or any of those magazines or anything like that. There was a shock jock in the Orlando area. It was a shock jock radio show on WDIZ. Baxter and Mark, Rick Baxter and Mark Stamansky. Nancy was a lot, like you said, Nancy didn't want to work. So a lot of times we'd go to bikini contests, things like that. Miss JJ Whispers, Miss Hawaiian Tropic of Florida, things like that. And she'd enter them, and a lot of times she'd win, and that would pay the bills. It was really good. So we met these two shock jocks, and I believe it was at the Florida Miss Hawaiian Tropic contest. And we became friends with Mark Samansky. Now, Nancy was 20, and Nancy was 19, and I was 20. And we became friends with Mark Samansky and his wife. So we went out to dinner with him a couple times. And again, we were married, we were young, we were kids, we were stupid. We went to their condo in Orlando one night after dinner and drank some more. And we went to one room. Mark and his wife went to their room. Of course, we did our thing. We spent the night over there, and we had no idea, but Mark Samansky filmed it. It was sold by Mark Samansky to Hustler for $1,000 before he died. No, we had no idea. The video appears after Nancy passed away.
Right.
We had no idea that it even existed. And 6 months later, Bill Otten actually called me. He heard something about it. We found something on the internet. He said, "Hey, you need to take a look at this." And I knew that it wasn't good when I saw what was coming out. And it just went from there. So who knows? 35 years later, it's crazy. Few people know who I am. I don't go out telling people normally. They usually find out the hard way, and if they do, it makes me like my 15 minutes fame type thing.
Right. Sandra Toffolini, the sister of Nancy, has gone on record in the past as saying that, when Nancy and you were divorcing, Nancy and Kevin were deeply in love. The stories popped up over times. Now, you did describe that there were no issues. Is there anything to her comments, or is it, that cut and dry the way she tried to make it out, or is this just, BS coming from your end?
Sandra, we used to babysit Sandra. When Sandra was a little girl, 6 years old, she'd be with us on weekends and everything else. She didn't know back then. Kevin and Nancy started after we were divorced or after we were separated. That started later when they were on the road. Sandra just doesn't remember.
I just want your thoughts on this because I have to know how you feel emotionally when you hear this kind of crap. The rumors that have gone on for years that Kevin Sullivan was the one behind this. Does this make you sick? Can you just give us your thoughts on this sort of rumor?
There's no way on earth Kevin had anything to do with it.
Were you still talking to Nancy when she was married to Chris?
The last time I talked to Nancy, I got an email from her when she was pregnant. And that's when she was 40 years old. That's the last time I've ever heard from Nancy. And because Nancy and I never wanted kids, we weren't going to have kids. I have a son. Things happen, of course. I have a son that's 23 years old and going to Florida State University right now for his master's. And Nancy, when she got pregnant, she sent me an email. Guess what? I'm pregnant. And I hadn't talked to her in a couple of years at that point. So I said, well, guess what? I have a son also.
Wow.
And it was a very brief email conversation. And I think she was very, very happy with Chris because I never heard from her again.
What were your feelings when you find out about this murder? I know you're upset, but what goes through your mind?
It was horrible. It was really bad. It was a rough month actually, because Nancy kept her professional name as Daus quite a bit. Everybody knew that, so the media wouldn't leave us alone. And gosh, I had to turn my cell phone off, my house phone off, and everything else. The first day we had 75 phone calls from Time, Life, People, the New York Daily News, everybody, ESPN.
Contact with Nancy's family over the years after this?
Not really, just Sandra. I do talk to Sandra occasionally. I talk to Sandra probably at least once a year. Her parents, I've only seen them for the court trials and stuff like that. I feel so bad for her family. At times, I wish I didn't help Nancy get into wrestling. Who knows where she would be now? She probably wouldn't have been passed away. I do feel bad at times about that. But I feel so bad for her family and everything that they've been through.
Your personal thoughts on Chris Benoit, please.
Know the man. I know bad things happened. I don't know Nancy's life that last 7 years when she was with Chris. I don't know how bad of a person he was to her. We do know what he did, and hopefully he burns in hell.
How do you feel about Chris Benoit's son and the pain he's going through? Did you watch the Dark Side of the Ring episode? Obviously you did.
Oh, yeah. I watched it a couple times, yes. And
So-
I'm glad that Sandra and him got back together. That was really good. He's going through the same thing Sandra went through. And Sandra's taken is really, really hard. Nancy with Sandra's life. And I feel so bad for Sandra. And her Chris's son also.
Would you say the Dark Side of the Ring episode was accurate?
Well, the early parts, like I said, Sandra didn't remember a lot. The first 20 minutes of it. After that was really about Chris. And I think it was well put together, the Dark Side episode. I think it focused a little too much on Benoit and Guerrero. I don't know if that was really the cause of anything. I think they played that up a little bit too much.
That's a great point. I felt like the piece itself was making excuses for why Benoit did what he did.
Exactly. That's how I felt. And I think it was more of the steroids and all that.
Look, it's clear you had a really good relationship with Nancy, but I'm going to ask you this question. Other rumors state that Nancy was a pretty aggressive woman and would get physical.
Any truth?
Any truth to that on your end? What you experienced?
Never. Not one time. Not one time did we ever lay a hand on each other. She was always sweet, lovable Nancy. Never had an issue like that.
We love Billy Jack here at Monte the Pharaoh, but I got to ask you this. How much drug scene did you see in the brief time as you're breaking Nancy? And were you concerned that was she vulnerable to narcotics? Did you ever wonder or worry about how much that could affect her or the business itself? Because Benoit was obviously hooked on roids or whatever it was that scrambled his mind. Other people did massive amounts of coke and all these. Were you concerned about whether or not that could change her as a person?
I was, yes. I was concerned about that. So, yeah, we didn't see a lot of it, but we saw enough, and I was definitely concerned about it. And that was one of the decisions that I wanted to get out of it. Again, when we started this whole thing, when Kevin and the group and the whole Troop of Darkness started this, and we had Nancy chained to Kevin and so forth, we were the first people to do that. She was the first woman to do anything like that, and she just went from there to Robin Green to woman, from the Fallen Angel. She pioneered women in wrestling that we know today. It wouldn't be a Miss Elizabeth, Precious, Sunshine, and all the rest of them without what Nancy did.
How did you feel when she was taking,
when she went to ECW, for example, and she would actually take a cane shot or something like that? How'd that make you feel?
Only you would do that.
Nancy was tough.
She was. Okay.
Nancy was tough. Nancy wasn't like a normal girl.
Is fame overrated, or what say you?
No,
Yeah.
I believe it is. Some of the stuff that we went through, just my family and I, after Nancy's murder, it was horrible. the paparazzi and everything else. And you got to remember, I was away from Nancy for 30 years at the time, or whatever it was. And I had paparazzi in my driveway. They wouldn't let us out of the house. It was crazy.
30 years? 30 years, and all of a sudden the whole world's up his crankshaft? I would have lost my mind.
You know, again, you probably can't answer this question, but I've always wondered why Nancy never went into the WWE when Chris moved to the WWE. Do you think she just wanted out of the wrestling scene and just be a mother?
Yes, there was no doubt. Nancy could have had a lot more opportunities and a lot bigger career if she wanted to. She had that much talent. I just don't think she really wanted to work.
How do you feel about the never-ending debate from certain wrestling fans that Chris Benoit, the wrestler, and Chris Benoit, the person, should be subdivided and only his wrestling should be judged and he belongs in the Hall of Fame? How's that make you feel?
That's crazy. That's insane. Chris Benoit should not be in any Hall of Fame, plain and simple.
Any final advice for some wrestlers who bring their wives into the business? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, after what I experienced, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't bring my wife into the business of wrestling at this time. Like people used to ask me, how did you guys get in? And I said, well, it was like we were in the right place at the right time. But really, what I tell people now is we were probably in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's where we ended up.
Wow. After splitting with Nancy, did you ever get a phone call from anybody like a Paul Heyman, or have you ever even spoke to Vince McMahon somehow over the years?
When we were working together in Florida and Texas and Georgia and all that, we were with the NWA, the Championship Wrestling of Florida, and so forth like that. So Vince hadn't really started yet. You got to remember, we were doing this from 81 to 85. But that was really before Vince.
Gordon Soley, baby.
You had your regular job. What was Nancy making in the beginning of her career as, as a valet?
Not a lot. She didn't make a lot of money back then. I was a contract worker at the gas company reading gas meters, and Nancy didn't drive, so I'd read the meters really fast. We'd drive to the next town, and she'd do her thing, and we'd drive all night to get home.
So what was a typical payday for a show back then?
Oh, $75.
Now, at any point, did you want to be a wrestler?
Not really, no. I did my own thing with Kevin and the group, and that was enough.
All right.
No cane shots for you again.
Gotcha.
So did Nancy start making big money at any point while you were married, or that all happened after she left?
It just happened. She started doing really, really well just after we got divorced. That's what I was trying to tell her, because we were not making any money doing this. It was a crazy life, going all over the place, all the traveling and so forth, and we were not making any money doing this. And I said, Nancy, if you're going to make it as a wrestler in the wrestling business, you're going to probably have to do it without me. There's no room for me in this.
Right.
I have to start taking all these trips without me. And that's when we decided to let her live her dream and follow her career and go from there.
We really appreciate the insight on Nancy's life and your life, and it's been a pleasure having you on, Jim.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and you all have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This life is tearing me apart. This life is tearing me apart. Remember when I was with you? Love was all we really knew. I saw the beauty in this world. nothing from the start. After all we've been through, where are you? So now it's over, gone so fast. Still all these pictures of my past. I thought that love was meant to last forever. This life is tearing